welcome to today's Grow panel in celebration of Black History Month. So today we're going to be looking back at Black representation within music, advertising, and the creative industries more generally. We're going to be examining where we are now and where we still need to go, and most importantly, what we need to do next. So it's with much pleasure that I'll be introducing you guys to today's esteemed panel. First of all, we have the brilliant Mathieu Ajan, a BFI Network talent executive and founder of Bounce Cinema, an organization that increases awareness into the world of film. So I'm going to try and do introductions slightly different today, which is I really want to hear from our, we've got a brilliant panel here. I want them to sort of describe what they do in their own words. So Mathieu, can you please sort of give us an insight in what an average day looks like for you? So just to give us a little sort of flavor of what your world and what your work is.
Cool. How's it going, everyone? I guess a typical day for me is supporting, listening, and helping filmmakers. So I've got two hats. So one of my hats is working for the BFI Network, and I'm one of 6 executives across the UK. And we commission short films and develop feature film concepts. And then beyond that, with Bounce Cinema, an organisation that I founded, we essentially connect audiences from across the London and outside London with films they might not traditionally watch. So it might be international film, champion black stories, and just stories all around from the world.
Thank you so much, Mathieu. And next we have the brilliant Dane Bradshaw, who has been working across the music industry in various fields such as journalism, PR, and radio over the last decade. But more recently, Dane has been working in synchronization for Ministry of Sound's publishing company. Dane, can you tell us a little bit about what your world looks like on a day-to-day basis, a day in the life of Dane Bradshaw?
Hey, my day-to-day job is essentially sync is short for synchronization, but essentially it's music licensing. So I work with TV production companies, film production companies, ad production companies, independent online content creators, and I represent a catalogue of music. That's Ministry of Sound's publishing catalogue, and my job is essentially to pitch, negotiate, and license music from our catalogue to content creators. So it's a lot of, in a previous life, a lot of face-to-face meetings and coffees, but now it's a lot of just emails, calls, Zooms, keeping people updated with what's going on with your catalogue, answering briefs. People send music briefs, so they'll be looking for a piece of music for a certain advert or for a television program or something. They'll send me the details of what they want, and then I'll try and suggest something which I feel is suitable from our catalogue, and then take it from there.
Thank you so much, Dane. Next, we have the legendary Paulette Long, OBE, Deputy Chair at UK Music Diversity's Task Force. And Paulette has been a board director of the MPA, Music Publishers Association, since 2004, a co-chair of the Brits Council, and much, much more that we cannot fit within the next few minutes. Paulette, can you please let us know what your day-to-day looks like?
Because you know what, my day-to-day is absolutely bonkers at the best of times. I think I can only say that I've got now I've developed what's probably considered a portfolio career, and that sounds really posh, but I just do lots of stuff simultaneously. And I think I can only look at today. So today I'm here with you with the wonderful Grow team. This morning I was negotiating with my artists whether or not they were going to do one event or another event. I was liaising with UK Music with regards to speaking to BBC local radio tomorrow, because the diversity report's going to be released and they want to particularly speak to me. So I have to have a debrief with them later on today. I'm doing some mentoring with some women in Australia at 9 o'clock tonight until midnight, because it's their morning in Australia. Help them to negotiate and pivot with regards to what they're going to be doing in the sector, in the music industry in Australia, based on what COVID is doing to that territory, and lots of other things in between. So my days are really varied, all music and creative focused, but coming from many different angles. And I just came out of a meeting with PRS and Music Foundation, who are doing some work with a new organisation, who are looking at diversity for ensembles, orchestras, and education.
Thank you, Paulette. A portfolio indeed. That's very, very varied. And finally, we have the wonderful Monique Needham, a writer and director who's content director, at global lifestyle marketing agency, MKTG. Monique, can you tell us a little bit finally about what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of balanced between two, because I'm content director at MKTG. So content strategy and planning for brands, just in terms of like the stories and the messaging that they want to put out to the world. So that's one side. And then the other side, so 2 years ago, I decided to do what I really wanted to do, which was make films. And be a filmmaker. So like the other part of my day is writing and developing, and just put out a short film, finish a short film recently. So just pushing that. So my days are like split into, and they're very long days as well.
Thank you, Monique. Everyone's days sound super duper busy, which is actually a very amazing thing given the climate that we're in. It's a very unpredictable time, so very glad everyone's booked and busy. So for today's conversation, we're going to essentially take it all the way back. We're going to be sort of looking at the beginning of your careers, where we are now, and sort of then, I guess, focusing on what you guys' hopes and thoughts are about the future. Again, especially during this period where we are sort of battling not just a global medical pandemic, but also, very much one that feels like what people have been calling a racial pandemic, in terms of the resurgence of Black Lives Matter and the, continued disenfranchisement of Black people across the globe. So to take it from the start, I want to ask you guys about what your first job was in the industry. And I think, if you don't mind me picking on you, we're going to start with Monique, because we just heard from you.
Yeah, sure. So I had to think about this. First job industry was, I would have been about 19 to 20. I was a runner on Big Brother when it was on Channel 4 back in the day. Endemol was my very first job, but I was a live runner, so I only worked on Fridays. So it was like a 7 a.m. till 2 a.m. job. And just runner is you do anything and everything on a production. And I kind of got it by accident. I was part of there was no Twitter to go and find a job then. So I was part of like this email thread where people threw random jobs, and I had no experience. I just came out of uni, or was in uni at the time. And I just thought, I could try that. And then someone contacted me, and it was like, I remember the feeling. I was like, oh my gosh, TV job, it's going to be great, because I was young and didn't know what to expect. But it was my entry. It was my entry into understanding like this world and film, TV, just this world. So it was a good experience.
Thanks so much, Monique. Dane, what was your first job within your industry?
So like I'd say, I'm going to break it down to two. So my first internships I would have done around 18. I was working at Music Magazine during my summer. I got that through, I think, a friend of a friend just kind of referred me because they were looking for interns. So that would have been about 18. And it wasn't until I was about 24 that I actually got the first full-time paid job in music industry. And that was just a PR assistant at a club called Cable in like London Bridge, which is now closed. So yeah, I was kind of doing some of the PR, talking to journalists, trying to get press for like upcoming events. Also this was when forums were still a thing. So you'd post on like music forums about, upcoming events and stuff like that. So yeah, broke it down into two kind of things for you.
Thank you, Dane. Mathieu?
I would say I had two paths. So I started off in freelance photography. So I was, self-employed originally. But I remember my first gig was taking pictures of one of my auntie's dinners. So like, I think a family member probably gave me my first opportunity. Then after that, my first work experience was at the BBC. And I worked on a production called Marvelous. And there was a producer called Katie Swindon that hooked that up. So I was on a set for 2 weeks, and we had the opportunity to work in different areas of production. And yeah, after that, that's me.
Thank you so much. And Paulette, there's a lot of conversation about people having two sort of paths within to getting to where they are. Was that something that you can relate to, or did you just sort of have that one shot?
One shot, I think. I came in through work experience. I was doing a business course at college, but my tutor was doing backing vocals for a band called Big Country. And so I was one of the good girls at school, and actually turned up for at uni and turned up for my classes. So she asked me to go down to their management company for 2 weeks work experience. And at the end of that work experience, they asked me to come back as the office junior. So I started, at the time they were managing a band called Big Country. They then picked up another rock band called The Cult. But I worked predominantly on the PR side. And on the PR side, they looked after artists like Ozzy Osbourne, Frank Zappa, Alice Cooper, Luther Vandross, Eka Mouse, Joe Number Trading, Eurythmics. So I was sort of catapulted right into the rock stroke pop arena. And that's where I cut my teeth doing public relations, predominantly on the regional area. So I was a regional press officer by the time I finished my first role.
Thank you so much, Paulette. So all of you sort of started out in, I'd say, a very different climate compared to where we are today. Monique, you mentioned that there was no sort of Twitter in which you could at people and, you know, request a job. It was email chains. Dane, you spoke about forums. It was just a very different time. Aside from those differences, what would you say were the most difficult things for you when you were young Black people starting out within your respective industries? And I want to take that to Dane.
Okay, I think, at that time, it would have been just the access to information. And, you know, the internet was still around when I was starting out in work, but just the direction, because especially within music, everyone kind of looks at the stuff in the foreground and not the background. So I want to be a rapper, producer, artist, MC. It's only when you really, really get into the nitty gritty, you find out about, you know, the back end of stuff, the royalties, the sync, the administrative side of it, and just, you know, and as time has gone on in music, more jobs have been created through, you know, the technology that we use now. But I think it's just knowing what you actually can do in the field was probably like the most difficult thing to find out. And I only really found that out through just like talking to people and keeping like on the charge to try and just get in the industry, basically.
Thank you so much, Dane. And I guess what sort of, if you don't mind me asking, what kept you going? Because as you said, it was a different time, and, you know, it sounds like you had to be a bit more sort of on your feet than I suppose maybe. I mean, maybe it's not fair to say that more so than young people coming up today, but I do think that the information definitely was more difficult to sort of access. So how did you kind of keep yourself motivated in terms of, you know, getting into what seemed like an impenetrable industry at that point?
Just something I always really wanted to do, something that I knew once I was given a chance that I'd be good at and I'd be able to like contribute to like massively. And, you know, I think, you know, growing up in London was an advantage because I already kind of, you know, was comfortable in these surroundings. I think, you know, if you're coming from outside of London into London, trying to make it, trying to get on, it can be really, really, really tough. But I kind of had a like inner belief that, you know, I'm from London. I'm sure once I kind of meet the right people and I get to them, I'll be able to find something that, you know, is suitable for me. So it's self-belief probably more than anything else.
Thank you so much. Paulette, what difficulties did you face when you were sort of first starting out?
I was different. I mean, the difficult, I don't know if it's difficulty, but I was aware that I was a young Black girl from South London. I spoke differently to everybody else that was there. And I think people don't really recognize the language thing. I think at first, if I step back a bit, I remember when I was in the Brownies, and we used to play a game where you'd go sort of in a circle and say the items that you had in your that you were taking away on a holiday with you. And I remember some of the terms that I would use then. So it went to me and I said, what would you take on holiday? I would take my tie head. And then the next person would have to say, I would take my tie head and I would take my toothbrush. And I remember saying something like tie head, and all the girls looked at me. It's like, what do you mean tie head? That's what we called it at home, but it's a headscarf. And just the language differences that there are for things that at home, this is how we speak, this is life. And I've entered into a zone where it was a different language. They did things differently. So I went there and, you know, tea, we would have tea at home with evaporated milk. I would go to work and it was cow's bottle milk. Just simple things that people, if you don't know it, then you don't know it. And I speak it just to help people to recognize that there are so many differences with people that you don't always recognize. Something you think a thing that you're doing is generic, but it's not. So for me, it was really recognizing how different I was. And also when I started to go to the gigs, all my friends dropped off. I went by myself because there was no one that was going to go and see The Cult or Ozzy Osbourne or Alice Cooper. So it was another thing for me. I lost my friends because I was in the music industry. It was rock and pop, and they were into soul, reggae, and other things. So there was a language thing, there was a culture thing. There was also recognizing there was nobody that looked like me around. Wherever I went, there wasn't anybody that looked like me. There were a few older, maybe Black men. There were artists, but there was nobody in the industry. So for me at that time, it was very much, I became a lone soldier, but I became strong being a lone soldier and understanding how to work in that environment and how to navigate. And I think it's that thought process from back there in the day that sort of enabled me to carry on and be where I am now.
Thank you so much, Paulette. Something that really sort of stood out to me was the fact that, you know, you speak kind of feeling obviously alienated within spaces that are predominantly white, and maybe there's a different sort of accent and different sort of lexicon that's being used. But then what really stuck out to me was the idea of you sort of being alienated in some ways within your own community, and the fact that you didn't, you know, your friends and your peers didn't necessarily want to sort of accompany you to certain music venues and gigs. Can you tell me more about that?
I remember watching Top of the Pops when it was on, and I was still living at home with my sisters and my parents watching Top of the Pops, and The Cult had a hit. So The Cult are a hardcore rock band, and I was like, oh my God, look at The Cult, they've got a hit. I remember my whole family sort of just looked at me like, who is this child in our living room? You know, I was this, who is she? What is she? How is she even singing the lyrics? So, you know, there were a lot of instances like that happened, but it just helped me to understand differing cultures, which I think has really helped me going forward.
Thank you so much, Paulette. It's definitely its own type of bilingualism for sure. Monique, please tell me about some difficulties that you faced when you're first starting out.
Yeah, I can. Like, I was sitting here nodding to Paulette's stuff because I 100% relate. I think I grew up in an area that was predominantly Black and Asian. So my world, everyone understood everyone. Everyone got everyone. I could just be free. And then I remember going into set that, you know, production job, the Big Brother one I took, and it was like I had to become a different person. It's like I had this home me, and then I had the work me, which, by the way, I've only probably stopped doing in the last 3 years. It's gone with me through life, but it's almost like I had to turn off a version of me, which people didn't get, which I've only realized, actually, I am who I am. I shouldn't have to turn that part off. But yeah, difficulties it was almost an adjustment also for me, going from a very diverse space and going into a space where I was the only one. I was the only Black female, and also not truly understand. I hadn't really experienced biases up until, real direct racism or biases up until the age 20. So when it was happening, it's almost like, it always used to take me back. It was always, and I had to almost tell myself, oh, this is happening. This is actually happening to me. Oh, okay. I didn't quite know how to react to it or deal with it. Or the opposite. I'd find people would try to relate to me just purely because I was Black. So by that, I mean, I remember working on a production once, and this guy just used to always do things like talk to me, say things like wagwan, and just use very obviously terms that he would associate with a stereotype. And I remember him saying to me, oh, have you heard the new Jay-Z album? And the thing is, I would just say no. I would be like, no, who's that? I don't know who you're talking about. Just because I didn't like being kind of grouped into this kind of box. So I think it was a difficult thing for me to adjust to that. And also kind of this feeling alien, sometimes not always getting certain jokes or knowing about, like, I'd never seen Only Fools and Tall Horses in my life. I still haven't. I know what it is, but I've never seen it because the home I grew up in, we didn't watch that. So I used to get made to feel bad when you're having general conversations. Oh, you haven't seen that, or you don't know what that is. It's like, no, but I do know what The Real McCoy is. Like, I do know that. I do know what, other shows are, but it was, and I think it took me years to kind of really figure out how to navigate the space. And actually realize who you are is fine, and you don't have to turn off elements of yourself. And by turning off, I don't mean like formalities. I genuinely mean character and personality, because you think it doesn't fit. And that's only been a recent lesson for me.
Thank you so much, Monique. I'm definitely stealing that idea of suddenly pretending you don't know who Jay-Z is. Sorry to this man, never met him.
It really
Apologies.
It works.
Very good trick. Definitely going for that. I just wanted to quickly sort of pick up on the fact that you mentioned that, you know, it's actually quite recent that you've kind of been able to understand the difference between, you know, professionalism and formality and character and personality and things that are more sort of intrinsic. And you said that was within the last 3 years. What would you say a sort of catalyst for that was?
I think it was because I wasn't aware I was doing it. It was like this thing I just did. And I can't remember, it was either a discussion I had with friends or and I think I was working in advertising agencies. And so in advertising agencies, you can wear what you want. You can wear Converse, you can do this. And I remember the headscarf, this similar headscarf to this. I was like, should I wear this to work? Should I wear this to work? And I stood there for about 20 minutes going, my hair's not done, so I have no choice but to wear this to work. But then I had to check myself and go, hold on a minute. Why is this such a big deal? And it kind of almost in that moment clicked that I'm actually turning elements of me off to be accepted in an environment. So therefore, if I continue to do that, then I'm not helping. I'm not actually helping anybody else by doing that. So it's like, actually get used to me wearing a headscarf. Let that be normal. Let me wearing a bright green, yellow print top in the middle of winter be normal, because then eventually you'll stop asking those questions and it will feel normal. And I feel like in my mind, I was like, I need to do this for a generation beneath, below, and so on, so that people stop asking those questions and people feel more comfortable to being who they are in kind of spaces that aren't like their own.
Thank you so much.
Can I add something there, Yoni?
Go ahead, Paulette,
something that's even more recent for me. I realized that I'm always being asked for my biography for different things, a short bio, a long bio, just a bio generally. And I actually have 2 biographies. One biography that says that I was the first Black person on the board of PRS, and I was the first Black person on the board of Music Publishers Association in its 123-year history. So I had a version that mentioned the Black me, and then I had a version that didn't mention that at all, that just said I'm on the board of PRS and I'm on the board of the MPA. And I would have to navigate, usually speaking to my husband, which one I sent to which company based on who I was sending it to. And it was only on the back of Black Lives Matter movement that that I even clocked that this was a part of my everyday life, that I'm still navigating, because I know that if I send the CV that says Black to some people, they're going to be offended. Why do you think you need to say you're the first Black person? Why is that important? Why would you need to mention it? So I didn't. And now I'm in the space where everybody's getting one biog. It is what it is. I was that. I was the only person. It took 123 years for the MPA, probably about 90 something years for PRS to have a Black person. It is what it is. Handle it. And it's just so good to be in a space now where, 35 years in, I'm able to just present me.
Thank you so much for that, Paulette. Gosh, and it's fascinating, I think, the sort of chasm between, generational differences, and the fact that it really is like, often, without sounding too crass, same beep, different toilet, despite what year we're in. It's like, there are generational differences here, and we're still kind of having these same conversations in different ways. And it's a bittersweet conversation, but we'll talk more about that sort of down the line. Mathieu, can you tell me what your sort of, I'd say your biggest difficulties were starting out?
I think when I first started out, it was mainly the challenge of just feeling like you don't know what the hell you're doing. And, little obstacles where, you're getting your first client and they're asking you to send an invoice and, what's your rates? And if you're getting your first gig and you don't have the community there to ask, how much should I be charging? How do you calculate certain things? I think it's just some of those practicalities in the early stages of my, particularly my freelance career. I just didn't feel like I had people I could go to. And then, even understanding that I was really good at what I'd done, I think at that stage, you almost felt like everything was an opportunity. So they're helping you more than you're helping them. So it was just, rewiring, your state of mind to showcase that, the work that you're doing has a lot of value and you should be charging accordingly. And I think another key thing was just, different interactions you would have, like you would arrive for a job and then everyone would automatically think you're here to do work experience, or they just didn't see you as like a valued person. And I guess, again, it's just like a psychological thing. It's just, getting that confidence in yourself and just knowing your worth. But I think as time goes on, I think there is definitely, it felt a lot different back then. And I say back then, like I'm like super old, but it didn't feel like there was like this, big, creative resurgence, a lot of people in the creative industries. So I feel like now it feels like there's a lot more, positive action, people that you can turn to.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that very much speaks to what Dane was saying about that kind of externalness to an industry. It sometimes feels like everybody's in on a secret that you're kind of not. I think especially when it comes on a practical level to rates and stuff. So I guess, even now, to be honest, as a freelancer, it can be difficult when there are not that many people in your industry that are from the same background as you. So you're kind of plucking rates out of the air. How did you, aside from, I suppose, internally deciding this is what I'm worth, was there sort of like, I suppose, a more practical way in terms of how you were able to start approaching what fees you were asking for?
To be honest, there was a tipping point, because I'd done a bit of work experience at an agency, and I saw what they were charging. I was like, what the hell? I've been sneezing. What have I been playing at? So I said to myself that the next client that I speak to, however much I want to charge them, on the times about 10, and at least if they want to negotiate, we can meet midway way. And it kind of just worked out from there. So I guess I just said to myself, I'm just going to start charging more and just doing a bit more research and, reaching out to people, asking them how much they charge. So yeah, those are the steps that I took.
Thank you so much, Mathieu. So this is all about celebration, essentially. And I think with Black History Month, sometimes we can get, there is a lot of difficulty, but it can obscure how much positivity there is and how many gains have been made in the meantime. So I would love to talk to you guys about what you feel are your biggest career achievements to date. It might actually be quite hard to pick one, but let's start with Monique. What would you say is at the moment, something you are most proud of in terms of your career trajectory?
So it ties in what I was saying before about like this whole discovery of me and myself in this space. And when I worked at Big Brother, I feel like I lost track of how long ago that was now, but I wanted to work in film. That was the whole reason why I started. And then my career kind of navigated it into the advertising space and worked with brands. But then it kind of connects with when I kind of decided I'm just going to be me. I decided I want to make films, and that's what I'm going to do. I probably should have done this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but resources have changed. The internet changed a lot of things. Accessibility to things changed, the ability to get cameras and working with other people, that sort of stuff changed. So biggest achievement is probably one from this week. I finished a film, which I've been working on for the last year and a half. So just finished that, and so that's kind of going to go through the festival route. But the biggest kind of achievement for me is actually saying, I'm 35 now. It's like, actually, I'm going to do this film thing, and it's not too late to do that. And so yes, let's see where that goes. But I think that for me right now feels like a big achievement.
It's a massive achievement. Congratulations, Monique. And I think it's a very inspiring anecdote, given that so often the narrative is that once you reach a particular point, especially within the creative industry, if you're under 30, sometimes even under 21, and you haven't done what you want to do, then you've got to, sort of pack it in. So I'm very, very excited to see that. And congratulations again. Mathieu, what would you say is your current biggest achievement?
It was like, I had to do a bit of deep thinking for that one. But I guess for me, through our organization Bounce, we show films, but we started an initiative where people that come to our screenings and people that are part of the wider community, they can apply for access to make their own films. So we produced a film with a filmmaker called Thomason Adepeju, and it was just a very beautiful film. And for us, we just felt super proud that we was able to do that. And then, the film was in Yoruba, it was in our home language. And it was just a film that emotionally touched a lot of people. So it felt really special to be a part of that for me.
Thank you very much. As a Yoruba woman, I appreciate that, especially. That's amazing. Also, Monique, there is a question in the chat already that is asking where we can find your film. You're already getting requests in.
Oh, okay. So it's not officially out. So my plan is to put it out through the festival circuit first, but I can share afterwards the kind of links and social media handles where all the information will be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Monique. Paulette, what would you say is your biggest achievement today in your long, illustrious career?
You know what? It was really hard for me to think about how to answer that. I suppose the main thing is that I'm still here. I think over 35 years later, I'm still in the music industry. I'm still doing my thing. I'm still, doing my hustle. I've still got a really good network and still really, really enjoying what I'm doing. So I suppose that in and of itself is an achievement. I think outside of that, it might be work I did with it was a focus group set up. I'm just trying to think. It might be in about 8, 9 years ago. We were called that at that time the Alliance for Diversity in Music and Media, and it was people. It was me. It was Keith Harris, Jackie Davidson, Daj Mahoney. There were a few of us that just got together because at that time we were like, "What's going on in music and the creative industries with regard to diversity? We need to bring about a change. We need to do something." And we used to meet maybe a couple of times a month, just to chat and come up with ideas. And we decided to come up with an idea for a diversity charter for the music industry. So us lot, we just got together and say, yeah, let's do this. We did our research. We spoke to the film company. We spoke to the book publishing organisations, looked at what they were doing, came up with a charter, and we put the charter to UK Music. UK Music adopted that charter, and it's that charter that's now turned into the diversity task force and the survey. So the fact that we got together as a group, recognised something was just amiss, we needed to do something, and got something set in the system that's still going now and bringing about massive change. And UK Music have got their diversity report that's come out today. So from those years ago to where we are today, it's been a long journey, but I'm really proud of the work that's happened within that time.
Thank you so much, Paulette. And Dane, what would you say to date is your proudest achievement so far?
I think it would probably be being in publishing, because I started in 2015 as like a entry-level admin assistant, and then within 3 years I was after that, so let me give you the timeline. So I started at Universal Publishing for a year, then went to Sony ATV, did more kind of creative job within Sync, which was involving more client relations and pitching the music. Did that for 2 years. And then I've got my current role at Ministry of Sound Publishing, which was head of department. So I kind of just basically went from an entry level role to a head of department role within 3 years, which was quite a quick jump. But also I did start that first job in publishing when I was like 28 and quite seasoned and had a very strong idea of, how to do things and how I wanted things to go. So I was very like driven, shall we say, to kind of just keep climbing. And I could see it was an industry that, you could, if you have the right attitude, you can definitely make some advances in quite a quick time.
Thank you so much, Dane. So we have been talking about the fact that, everyone's entry levels and points and, when they sort of got into their respective industries has been quite different. So I'd be very interested in knowing how you guys each feel about the changes that have taken place over the past few years or since you first started in terms of representation. What you feel those changes have been, whether you feel they've gone far enough, if you feel like you've seen any change at all, because some of you may not. I'm just interested in where you feel we are essentially with the representation, conversation within each of your industries. Let's take that to Mathieu, please.
It's an interesting one because I think during this chapter, it feels like there's so many things going on at the same time. Like you see lots of brand campaigns, all of a sudden your Instagram ads all feature like Black people, everything just feels a bit, what's going on. But I think in the mix of it, we've seen some organizations, try to make some key hires at the top. But I feel like a lot of, grassroots organizations have done a lot of work to really push things forwards. People are signed their own funds. People are just trying to take ownership about creating change. But for me, specifically in the film industry, I thought, there's still some work to be done. I don't know if I've seen some massive changes so far, and it's not going to happen overnight. But yeah, that's my perspective so far.
Thank you, Mathieu. And I think that's something we're definitely going to get back to, actually, because I think the point about, Instagram adverts and kind of visual change and change that you can see quite physically, but that's not necessarily being replicated behind the scenes is a very important point. Dane, how do you feel about it?
I think it's good that we're having these really open and honest conversations now, and it's kind of, inescapable. You can't really get away from it. And I think that needs to happen. And yeah, I think, you know, the fact that it is COVID, it has given people a lot more time to actually like assess, look at things more objectively, and, you know, analyze, you know, how we were living and how we were acting before, you know, George Floyd and stuff happened. Within music, yeah, there's been a lot more conversations generally, even just like artists and stuff. Like this month, a lot more of the kind of upcoming drill artists, I've seen them do more stuff dedicated towards like Black Lives Matter and being a bit more conscious than they would normally do. So I do feel it's having a positive effect on most aspects of music. I just need it to be consistent really, and not stop once October stops, and not stop once we hit 2021, and just kind of literally keep same energy moving forward.
Thank you, Dane. Definitely, again, something we're going to be speaking about, because I do feel like one of the fears that we're all facing now is, you know, we've seen a massive spike. Are these adverts and these conversations and this visibility going to be dropped outside of October, outside of the coronavirus pandemic, outside of 2020? So we'll definitely get back to that. Thank you so much. Paulette, how do you feel? Do you, especially because, you know, as you said, you you were crucial in terms of creating the diversity task force, and those, I think you said you set that up sort of 10 years ago. So if you're even using that, for instance, as an entry point and looking at the changes that you would have seen over the past maybe decade, do you feel they've gone far enough, or do you feel like there have been any changes whatsoever?
Conversation is different. The sound is different. If I'm talking about the last 6 months, I think people are taking it seriously. I think there's still a lot of hot air out there. There's still a lot of people that are just doing things that are knee-jerk. There's still a way to go before we get systemic changes. But it does sound different. And I think more than anything, just the conversations that have been taking place, my vocabulary has changed. I can say things like unconscious bias and white fragility and gaslighting, whereas I didn't have those words to use before. I understood it, I experienced it, but I didn't have the words to use. So there's so much that's different now. And I'm just hoping that, you know, the groundswell is gonna continue to bring about change. But I think one thing that's really quite poignant for me is, I think, when we're looking at ethnic diversity within the music industry, I think this is the first time that there's been a generation of young guns coming through, firing on all cylinders. But there's people like me, the generation above, that's been in it for 30 years. And I think just that in itself is the first time that's happened. And I think as long as the two are on the same page, I think we can bring about change. So those of us that might be at border level, that have got the experience, if we continue to push from where we are, and the young guns that are all coming through in the relevant areas of the music industry that they're working on, if they continue to push, I think jointly we can bring about change. But it didn't happen the last time. When we were energetic and we were diversity, we need to do something different. There wasn't the elders up there to give us the support system that we needed. But now it's a completely different landscape. And I think this is the thing that might bring about change. We're coming from both ends. We've been there, we know it. They're coming up, they're hungry. You know, young people are hungry and they're angry and they want change now. And I think that might do it. I'm hoping that will help to do it.
Thank you so much, Paulette. Monique.
Sorry. Yeah, for what Paulette just said, I think that was one of my points about the people being at the top now. And just have for two reasons. Visibly seeing someone at the top that looks like you is motivation. It doesn't get you to where you need to be, but having that visibility kind of gives you some sense of, oh wow, I can do this, for number one. But two, just exactly what Paulette said, just those people at the top helping those coming through and being that support, I think definitely is a positive thing toward the change. There is still work to be done, but I think something quite key, and when you first put the question to us, I thought about the internet. I think I touched on it before, and Mathieu's just said about grassroots and the fact that the internet and the social media and all of that has allowed people to have a voice that is, and if I talk about it specifically from a production television point of view, pre sort of YouTube, you couldn't make something and just get an audience and put something out. You couldn't really do that. So whereas now, if you've got a story to tell, or you want to share something, whether it be a blog, an article, whatever it is, the internet allows you to build your niche and build your audience. And there is power now in your audience buying into you, and those bigger brands and those big companies actually going, hold on, there is 2 million people over there watching what's going on over there. But had that same person or that same group tried to approach that same brand or that same organization from the beginning, there probably would have been no door to be open. So it's a combination of these grassroots, having our voice, the internet, top dogs, people at the top, all coming together, that will push to change. And I think we're at this place now. I feel it, that we're not there, but I feel confident now, 2020, even though we've got there's a lot to be done, but we're in a place where actually we can keep pushing and keep working. And, each generation gets to the top, and then there's more coming through, and then there's this nice cycle. So the key thing for me is this power of voices being heard that you may not have heard 20 years ago, just due to lack of accessibility.
Thank you so much, Monique. And I could not agree more. I think the way the internet has democratized every industry is just incomparable. And I think it's interesting, so often when we speak about whether this change is sustainable, people give quite lofty answers, but I feel like everyone's been quite practical and spoken about the tangible ways in which, things are can possibly change, fingers crossed. So quite a few of you guys touched on, the current conversation. I think especially a lot of what's happening now is obviously against the backdrop of a resurgence of Black Lives Matter, against the backdrop of the very tragic death, killing of George Floyd, which has impacted, I think, pretty much every single industry, certainly every creative industry. I still feel that when we discuss potential change, we're quite tentative. And I think that's understandable because, we've all, I think every one of us essentially has been in our industries long enough to have seen there sort of be a small diversity spike or boom, only for it to kind of peter out again. What do you guys think can be done essentially to ensure that the change this time round is maintained and that energy and momentum is maintained outside of Black History Month, outside of COVID, outside of 2020? Monique, I just want to take it back to you and see if you have any thoughts on that.
I think, and for me, and Black History Month, obviously we have it every year, and this is the first year it feels like actually there's a lot more been done than normal. I'm seeing a lot more things on Channel 4 than normal. And I do feel that, okay, what does 21 look like next year? Are we going to maintain the same energy? But for me, like, I think to myself, okay, projects that I work on, I have to just try in my own work, in what I'm doing, and in the people that I work with, to try and keep that energy, because what I'm not going to do is rely on everyone else to do that and be that voice. So I think it's a tricky one, because I actually don't have a probably succinct answer, because I kind of don't know the answer, but I can only bring it back to me and my personal point of view, and like seeing, okay, what can I do to kind of maintain that energy? Who can I connect with? Who can I work with to ensure that keeps going? But yeah, I do have slight pessimism to think, like, is this energy going to maintain? I don't want to have it, but like you said, I've seen this kind of peak up and dip down and peak up and dip down. But so yeah, that's my answer, even though I probably didn't answer your question. I don't know.
I think you did answer it, because I think as soon as you said, I don't think I have an answer, I thought, did any of us really? I don't know if there is one singular answer. So I think that was a fantastic answer. Dane, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, similar to Monique, really. I think we have to be in control of the change moving forward. It's good that, we've built awareness for everyone else and, to see what the kind of struggles are. But I think, it's about, whether it's in your industry or even with people not in your industry, just having these groups or these networks that people can tap into, benefit from, share ideas, share knowledge, share opportunities, and just have that as a consistent theme, because I think that's the only way you can kind of make sure that everyone's getting a good share of the progress, if we kind of take control of it. So I think just some autonomy, I guess, over our creative lives with other Black people as well, to help.
Thank you so much, Dane. And Paulette, I'm interested, especially because, you know, you have been sort of within the diversity conversation for a very long time. So I have no doubt you'd have definitely seen the peaks and troughs of it. How do you hope that we can maintain, especially as an individual who has maintained that energy consistently, how can we hope that that is something that is extrapolated out to, you know, beyond us that have our vested interests in diversity being a real conversation?
I mean, there are so many different ways that we can bring about a change. If I think about organisations, I think about companies, I think about hiring, I think about more diversity at senior management level. I then start to drill down. If I'm just going to think, let me just look at diversity at senior management level, because for me, there's so many areas to crack this. And I don't see any diversity at senior management level or on boards, and we know there's a problem there. Then you ask yourself, who's doing the hiring? What's happening within the HR departments? You ask yourself, what do the job descriptions look like? You ask yourself, who's sitting on the panel? Where is the unconscious bias? I think it's in those areas with regards to hiring that we need to look to bring about as much change as possible. So, for example, a job description that says, I want somebody, let me keep it in music publishing. I want somebody to work in music publishing. I want them to work on Counterpoint. I want them to have had 10, 15 years experience. Already you're not finding anybody from the Black community that has worked on that system and that has that many years experience. So that there's already a barrier to entry. We have to look at what are we doing? What are we saying? I've looked everywhere. We can't find anybody. Where have you looked? What are you doing? What are you doing differently? And that's just when I'm talking about recruitment. And recruitment is a space that we have to crack. Because if we don't make changes at senior management level, it's not going to reflect through an organisation. The organisations that I see that are really making a difference, that are genuine, is when the sound is coming from the CEO at the top who is accountable. And because he's accountable at the top again, and you've got somebody that's you've got a team at the bottom. You may have HR or you may have a D&I department. If those two are working succinctly, then you're going to bring about change. But if the person at the top doesn't care or is interested in other things, you're not going to see any difference. And for me, it's about what systems do we have in place? Why does this organisation that has been working within Black music for so many years not have anybody Black in their office, not have anybody Black on their board? What is going on here? Why are we allowing it to be that? Not signing, in some instances, any Black artists doing Black music. You know, there's so many places that we can look at. So if I look at funding, what's going on in the funding arena? What does that look like? What Arts Council, what can you do differently? Because if we don't get the money, if we're disadvantaged in that arena, we're not going to be able to make a difference. You have organisations like Jazz Refreshed who are on a token of the amount that some other organisations in other genres are doing. Why don't Jazz Refreshed get more money than they're getting now? What's happened there? What's been the problem? So for me, I can look around the whole ecosystem of the music industry. Everywhere I look, I can now see what the issues are and see what we can do to make a change. But more than anything, people need to be aware and they need to want to do something different. They need to be prepared to have those difficult conversations. They need to be prepared to be hurt. We're going to be seeing a lot of white fragility and Black fragility. There's going to be a lot of gaslighting going on. It's going to be a bit of a painful season, but we just got to be prepared to go through that pain to bring about long-lasting change. And for me right now, the key thing is legacy. I keep saying to people now, I haven't got another 10 years of this. I haven't got the time or the inclination, and I can't be bothered, to be honest. I can't wait to hope that the interns that are coming in now, because on intern level, it looks good. It looks good with regards to gender and ethnicity, but we already know that by the time it reaches sort of mid-career level, it falls off. So I haven't got the time to wait another 10 years to see that not working, to see that the same issues that were there are still there. So for me, we have to work. I want to get people at senior management level now. I can't wait for the interns to get there. So it's about, if you really want change, somebody's got to step down. Something's got to move about. There's a recruitment freeze at the moment, but I don't care. We've got to make a change, and we've got to make a change now. But you've got to look differently, look at things differently, and you've got to want to do it differently. So for me, there's a lot that we can do, practical things that we can do, but we need people that are really on board and really want to make a difference. And we also need to back it with money, because some of these things need to be data driven, and we need to be able to pay people to get the data to help us to see exactly where we need to bring about change. So yeah, I could talk about it for ages. So I was
about to say, Paulette, you took us all to church. Honestly, honestly, I could listen to that all day. Because one of the comments was, I heard no lies told. Absolutely, like, complete truth. So thank you for that, Paulette. Mathieu, what would you say is key to sort of maintaining that energy and momentum?
I think, off the back of Paulette, we need Paulette for president, because, I'm ready to, get cracking. But I would say, sometimes when you look at all the challenges that you have to face and, the community has to face, it's such a massive thing. And ultimately, everyone needs to play a part, the people on the ground, communities, corporations. But I think we need to be less naive when corporations do things that just simply say we don't belong here. And I think, Paulette touched on that. So, for example, organizations are getting funding to, to support Black communities. If they're pushing Black culture, but they're not hiring Black people, if they're paying Black people less, then, ultimately it says what it says on the tin. We don't need to pretend, where people stand on that. But I think ultimately the change needs to come from, the Black community specifically, and they just need the resources and to be empowered to create their change for themselves, because ultimately, we don't want saviors. I think it's just about leveling the playing field so that we can create, systems where we can thrive and change things. Because I think it sends a message if we always rely on, white institutions to save us. I think long term, that's not viable. We just need to have our own, be empowered economically. So that's my perspective on it all.
Thank you, Mathieu. This is such a powerhouse panel, because I have like 3 more questions, which I'm going to ask some different ones, but you guys actually managed to cover quite literally the content of the other 3 questions and everything that you guys said. So I'm going to skip all the way ahead to, what would you guys say is the best piece of career advice you've ever received in your life? Mathieu, can you tell me what the best piece of career advice you've ever received is?
I think the best advice I've been given is just to take a nap, because I think, when you're fighting all these challenges and these obstacles, you can just burn out, and you're not good to anyone when you're burnt out. And these things, they take such an emotional strain. You're going on social media, you're seeing Black people being killed, you're seeing all kinds of nonsense on your timeline. So important to look after your peace of mind and your well-being. So just take a nap and, recharge and be stronger for tomorrow.
Agreed. Napping is always good advice. Dane?
This is probably like life and career advice, but you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So listen more than you talk. That's served me quite well.
Thank you very much. That's actually not to plug my book at all, but honestly, it is in our book. Karen Blackett wrote the exact same advice in her foreword, because it's fantastic advice. Monique, what is the best career advice that you've ever received?
Similar to Dane, it's life and career. It's take time, take a second, because when you're talking or you're explaining yourself, you're doing something, not just to react. Take a second, breathe, and then speak. And it's something that came from my mum, because I used to talk really fast as a kid, and she's like, hold on, take a second, breathe, speak. It's exactly what she used to say to me, and I still apply that now. So sometimes even when you asked me that question just then, I was like, I don't know. It's like, take a second, breathe, speak. And it's worked for me in the ability to really express myself, articulate myself, and actually express what I mean, and not just respond in a way in which someone wants me to, or do something that I think someone wants me to. So yeah, that's been my advice.
Thank you so much, Monique. And finally, Paulette, what's the best career advice you've received?
It was from my mum. It was on the back of a event called the Black Music Awards. So before MOBO, there was a Black Music Awards, and I was part of the team that was putting that together. And the first year we did it, it was just awful. Really bad experience. I mean, I can't even, if I could do a film around some of the events that happened on the night. It was, it happened, but it was a really difficult experience. And the next morning I was like, oh, it's terrible. I'm a part of this thing, and look what happened. And my mum sort of just said, you're successful as long as you keep moving forward. Success isn't about the outcome. It's about 1 foot in front of the other. So she said, just take 1 foot in front of the other. That's all you need to do. As long as you're moving, you're a success. She said, as long as you're moving, you're a success. everything else is irrelevant. And I've sort of taken that through. So it's not, there's always stuff that's going to happen in life, but as long as I can keep moving, as long as I can put one foot in front of the other, then that is where my success is. My success is in my ability to keep going. And the following year, the Black Music Awards happened again, and it was televised by Channel 4. Mobo then superseded it, but we did it. So yeah, just keep moving forward. That's where my success lies. It's not in what happens.
Thank you so much, Paulette. And shout out to the mums. Mums give the best advice. I'm hearing a lot of wonderful mum advice. So, guys, we're going to have to speed through to the Q&A section. I'm really sorry, guys. We're going to have to really rush through it because we're quite short on time. But first of all, we've got one directed to all of you. So I'm going to pick on Mathieu, which is, how have you managed to navigate gatekeepers within your industry? Or like the sense of a boys' club?
I think with the gatekeeper thing, I think, you try your best, you ask people for opportunities, but if someone says no to you, you just have to find another path. Because I think some people on their journeys, they can spend so much time knocking on doors that will never open up for them. And, what I sense is that when you start building your own communities and building your own movements, then suddenly everyone wants to be your friend. So, if there's gatekeepers, you just got to, keep it stepping and just build your own house or table. And then, yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. One for Dane, which is from Luke H, who said when he started working in the music industry ages ago, it was an all-white environment on literally every level. Would you say things have changed?
Not really. It's funny because the music that's getting signed is like hella black music. You look at the charts, it's full of drill and Afro beats and that kind of stuff. But I'm obviously speaking from a publishing perspective, and yeah, publishing is definitely quite whitewashed when you get into the buildings, and generally I'm the only, if not maybe one of 3 black people in the whole building, so it's still in the background, behind the scenes, it's still very much white people involved in everything and pulling the strings. So yeah, you definitely need to kind of be aware of that and help and try and bring in as many black faces and other people of color as well, where suitable, to have those diverse opinions and ideas.
Thank you so much, Dane. I've just been informed we've got till 5 past, so we should be able to get through a few more. To Monique, have you ever been, and this is from Davina, have you ever been the go-to black person in your place of work? And if so, did you, when people sort of have their, I guess when people sort of mention like, oh, Jay-Z to you, but people having queries about certain things and potentially sort of seeing you as the, I guess, black correspondent or black person whisperer. Have you ever experienced that? And if so, did you shy away from that role or lean into it?
I have been in that. That's happened. It happens all the time, and it depends. So if it's like when I'm in brand campaign conversations and they want to go and do something wild, I have to tell that. Then, someone's asked me something that I think is wild. I'm like, no, that can't run, because ultimately that then trickles out into what we've seen, like H&M adverts, Dove adverts. So where I can, my contribution, I can't always stop it, but I can at least do what I can to make sure that those things don't happen. But then there's some instances where it does come to me, and as I've got older, I'm probably much more blunt now than I have been. So I make people very aware that, like, okay, I'm not the Black Dictionary. You can read books. There's so many books that you can read. I'm happy to point people in the right direction, but I cannot just be the person you go to every time you have a question. But it really does depend on what the question is. If I feel that there is an element of responsibility if it is something to do with the way something's going to be put out to the world. But yeah, it really, I have to navigate it. It's on a case-by-case basis, but generally I'm not the dictionary for all things black, because my perspective of the world is different to, say, your perspective. We've lived 2 different lives. We're both black women, but we're not exactly the same. And that sometimes in the responses that I give to people, I have to say that. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, but know that it's my view. It's not the black world view.
Thank you so much. And it's true, it's not the black world view, because there is no black world view.
It's no black
communities, not black community. Thank you so much. So this is from Lucy, and this is for you, Paulette. So rock music, despite its Black roots, has gained a reputation as being inherently white. And this kind of goes on from what you're talking about in terms of your friends not necessarily wanting to attend certain gigs with you. Have you sort of experienced that, not reputation, but I suppose, that association with your first job? And would you say that reputation that rock has for being a white medium has changed at all over the years?
Don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if we have a think about A&R, for example, when you do get Black people who are working in A&R roles, predominantly they're sort of shoehorned into working with certain genres. I think there's still there has always been this thing where you've got ethnicity alongside genre, and if I'm Black, then automatically this is what I do and this is what I know and this is the music that I'm into, and vice versa. I think there is sort of some level of colour somewhere in music genres that people assign and align to themselves. I'm hoping that it's changing. I'm hoping that people are recognising. I mean, I continue to say that as a Black woman, the band that I've seen perform the most for me is a band called Big Country, and that's a rock band from Scotland. It wasn't a genre that falls under Black music, but that's my experience. But nobody would do that. So I'm often spoken about in terms of dealing with reggae and soul and R&B, and I love all those heart music. But actually, I've got a lot of knowledge in other areas. But the assumption is that that's not the case. So I think people still assume if they were coming to speak to me, they would automatically speak to me about what they consider to be Black music. They wouldn't recognise the breadth of experience that I've got across all genres of music.
Thank you so much, Paulette. And we have time for one more question. And there is another one for you, actually, which is from Mo Sullivan, who said, in recruitment, I base shortlisting on a CV which doesn't detail ethnicity. What would you recommend rather to ensure inclusion of BME people?
I think you've got to start with your job description, which I think if you look at it, you'd probably find that there's a lot of things in there that you could write differently. Job descriptions, people are asking for nonsense. People write really good job descriptions that have got nothing to do with the job. And I've sat on panels where I'm asking people questions for an organisation that I know and I can't answer the question. I'm like, for goodness sake, why are we asked? It's like we're there to trick people. Why are we doing this? So there's a problem right the way through the chain. There's a problem with the job description and people not understanding. There's a problem with people not knowing the culture of their organisation. There's a problem with people not knowing what job they're actually asking people to go for. When they through to the interview, there's a problem with who's sitting on the panel. There's a problem with the questions that they're asked. There's just problems all the way down the line. Tear up whatever it is you're doing and start again is what I would say. Start again. And if you don't find enough people of colour in the first round, don't give the job out. Go back and try again. Ask people, network, spread, and pay people to assist you. Don't just send me an email, which I get. Can you send this out to your network? You know what? I've now got a boutique recruitment agency. I will send it out to my network. But if you employ somebody, I'm looking for a commission. We've got to shake it up and just do it differently. That's my thought. So right along the line, I think, from thinking about the job to recruitment, everything that you're doing needs to change. And I think if you approach it from that perspective, then you will bring about change.
Thank you so much, Paulette. What a note to end on. Luke M has commented, Paulette for Prime Minister. But to be fair, I feel like this is a whole government here. So yeah, thank you guys so much for everything. It's been a fantastic panel. And I'm very sad to say that we're at the end of it. But I hope that you guys have learned something. I certainly have. But yeah, thank you guys all for your time. And until maybe next Black History Month, hopefully before then, we'll have another conversation like this soon. Bye, everyone.